And in front of me, we are looking at a tomato plant. And today, I am going to be discussing how you prune a tomato plant. And so with these tomatoes, they are very delicate plants, and you can see they have a lot of little root-like hairs along the main stem, and a number of these leaflets with a number of leaves. And then we have a very strong stem, and you can see coming out of the top of the main stem, we have a number of little laterals that I call our suckers that come out from the nodes. And these are the areas that you want to remove from your tomato plants. What I advise is usually starting from the bottom of the plant and working your way toward the top. Sometimes I like to leave the top sucker on the plant just because it's possible that part of the main stem at the top might get broken off. So it's better just to remove suckers from lower parts of the plant, and that way if your main stem does get broken, it will allow for a sucker near the top of the plant to actually regenerate and regrow to keep that plant vigorous. So just to give an example, just to come over here, this sucker is not right at the top of the plant, but given the fact that this tomato plant is growing up along this fencing material, this is a good example to show, where we have a sucker that's coming out from one of the nodes off the main stem. And so you just very gently hold the edge of the sucker and just lightly pick it off. And so it should look something kind of like this, and redirect the nutrients and water to other parts of the plant to keep it strong and So these are some tomato plants that would really benefit from having either a cage system or some stakes and rope to help tie them up so that they can grow and develop fully and productively. And when we look at these tomato blossoms, the flowers of the plant, tomato plants have both male and female reproductive structures within the same flower, both the anthers and the pistils for the pollen storage. Here we are in front of another tomato plant, and we're going to do a little bit more pruning to remove suckers. And one other suggestion I have is also to remove any dead growth. So there's two terms we like to refer to, and one of those is necrosis, which is known as any tissue that turns brown and that dies. The other term is chlorosis, which refers to a yellowing of the tissue, which means it's suffering as a result of possible nutritional deficiencies or possible lack of water or other stress in the environment. So it's just important to be able to recognize and to diagnose what could be causing that issue. And so as we're looking at these tomato plants, I'm seeing some yellowing or chlorosis of this tissue, and you can see how it easily just snapped off. So I'm just going to remove that from the plant because it's not really doing anything to help with its growth. We can also see some little suckers that are starting to develop along the base of this tomato plant. So again, I would just lightly pick those off because where they're so close to the ground, they're not likely to develop into a healthy plant. So it's easier to remove those and redirect resources to the higher parts of the plant where we have our taller growth. And so as you're going through, you're likely to generate a little pile of all your suckers. And the important thing is once you've made your collection, not to leave them in the soil in the garden, because this can then allow new plants to potentially generate. So if you are able to remove those and put them into a compost pile, then it will keep them from causing any future concerns. And so as I look along this plant, I'm just going to continue to remove any suckers or dead or chlorotic tissue. And you can see that some of those came off very easily without really applying any pressure. And sometimes you will see some spotting on some of the tissue, and this is also very common of environmental stresses, possible bacterial or fungal development, One thing I suggest is if you don't know what could be causing the issues for your plant health, it's always suggested you can take a sample and submit it to a laboratory, and then they can diagnose exactly what's causing the problem. And so down here again, I do see the development of additional suckers, and so I can very easily remove those. And it's just important to be able to monitor over time. So if you can check on these plants every few weeks, then you'll be able to moderate the amount of growth. If you do see any growth where the end of the stem is completely yellow or turning brown, those are definite places you want to remove, because there will be no productivity at those ends of those lateral stems. And then up here we see there's little flowers, and we see lots of little clusters of healthy looking green tomatoes developing. Let me know in the comments how you like to eat your tomatoes. My favorite are fried green tomatoes that are made with eggs and Parmesan cheese, and they're really nice just fried in a pan with some oil. And so as you can see here, this tomato is in a caging system, which is really beneficial in a garden because it allows the plant something to grow along up against, and this helps with the structural integrity of the plant because it's less likely to droop over, as we had seen in some of the previous demo plots. As we're just kind of working up here, we do see a bit of chlorosis and necrosis on some of the foliage on this plant. And so for the most part, I would normally suggest removing any of that dead or damaged tissue. And it sometimes also helps because it'll open up breathing space for the rest of the plant, and that way it has better airflow. So as you can see, as you're removing more of this tissue, it is going to help the plant longer term. Now we are going to talk about a squash plant. Squash plants have both male and female flowers. And in front of me here is an example of a male flower. As you can see from inside, there is a single anther, which these bees are going to collect pollen that they can then transfer to the female flowers. And another way to identify this as a male flower, when you look underneath the floral petals, we can see that there is no fruit production immediately below the flower. Good evening and welcome back. In this segment, Fruit Pruning, I am going to be discussing Cinderella squash. And for this crop, we can see that these plants are growing very long and horizontally across the garden. And so with this plant, normally to prune it, we will look for the last fruit off the main stem and then count about 2 or 3 nodes past that fruit, and then anything past that second node, any of that vegetative tissue, we can remove. And this will allow the resources to be reallocated back to the main fruit production. And therefore there will be fewer of the squash, but larger in size, as opposed to a number of smaller squash that perhaps will not develop to grow as big. Here, from this last main fruit off the stem, we are counting 2 nodes, and then you can see this extra tissue. We will just lightly use our fingers to snap it off, and then you will see that this tissue can then be composted. And although it is a bit sharp there on the edge, you can also use a knife and that might give you a clean cut. But the main point is just removing some of that extra tissue, and that's going to allow the rest of this plant to develop properly. You can see how I left a few of these other flower buds, and then as you're continuing to check on the plants over the season, if you then decide that you don't want to have that many, you can easily remove additional as you need to. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to receive more notifications when I post new content, please subscribe to my channel. And if you have any comments, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below and I'll get back to you. We'll see you in the next video. Bye friends.